All right. All right. What up, B?
What's going on, Nick? Good to see you, brother.
Good to see you too, man. How's your week
Yeah,
going? End
it's
of
going well.
quarantine. How are you
End of
celebrated?
quarantine. Well, we're gonna go surf this afternoon, so that's gonna be like the celebration of actually being at ground level, yo. We've been up,
Ooh.
we've been up on the ninth floor this whole time, So being at ground level, like going back to the ground world is gonna be interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah,
putting on the shoes.
yeah, exactly. The zapatos.
Zapatos. Yeah. It's interesting. I heard an interesting quote the other day. It said, if you wear leather shoes every day, the whole world feels like leather.
Wow.
It's like, I think it's true
Yeah.
because that's your connection to the world. So you got to
Yeah,
put
yeah,
back
for
on
sure.
shoes, don't you?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But also got to connect to the earth. Like I've been in this apartment the whole time,
Mm.
so I haven't actually been connected to the ground, to the. But yo, get this, bro. So 2 days ago,
Hmm.
3 days ago, actually, Hawaii put in place, or Oahu, the island I'm on, they put in place a stay-at-home order starting
What?
today. Starting today.
What does that mean?
That means that everyone's told to stay at home and only leave for essential visits like grocery store, like really essential things.
And
But
surfing?
otherwise, it's stay at home order. I guess surfing, yeah, but you can't chill on the beach. You have to just go
Mm.
straight in the water and straight out.
Okay. Did they
Yeah,
specifically say that about surfing?
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. I mean, I guess like when you're surfing, you're pretty well socially distanced, right?
For sure, for sure.
But the thing is, none
Def-
of this shit's based on logic, so it could very well be completely wrong.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But that's how we're gonna celebrate, man. I guess we're gonna celebrate end of quarantine, beginning of stay-at-home order with a bit of a celebratory surf, just to
So,
get in the ground, get in the ocean.
so reflecting on these last 14 days, what did you learn?
Mm, wow. I mean, what have I learned? I learned a lot about prana,
Mm.
from firsthand experience, just from, every day in quarantine, we're doing 2 hours of Kundalini every morning. First thing, we have our Kundalini sadhana, which we started in Oregon and kind of transferred over here. But just like here, because yeah, my practice has really deepened here, because
Mm.
it's a different space, right? It's a different environment. Every place you're in is a totally different environment, right? It's a different energy field, right? So I think something about this energy field here on Oahu, and connecting into that and doing my practices here, it's like really deepening. So I've learned a lot about, yeah, just the beautiful, ecstatic and blissful feelings that you can really tap into in a sustainable way when you allow prana to really flow through all of your energetic channels. So
Mm.
that's been a nice firsthand experience. Um, yeah, another thing I learned, man, it's been a lot, bro, because we've been here every day, all day, right, with my partner. And I think one thing that we do really well is keep each other on our toes.
Mm.
We're always, it's always something, right? It's always like we're always kind of riffing on something. So it's like every day is a lot of learning. It's a lot of learning. Um, yeah,
What ways do you keep your partner on their toes?
curiosity, questioning,
Mm.
always inquiring further about, where, or just kind of, from a place of understanding and curiosity, right? Of like, where do certain things come from, or let's unpack that. I don't think either of us really take things at face value, and we're
Mm.
both very inquisitive people.
Yeah.
Um, and and we're both able to have, very confronting, tough conversations about any number of topics. So I think, yeah, just inquiry. I would say inquiry is the main way of keeping each other on our toes, and accountability. Accountability. I think Cam makes me a better person. You know, Definitely makes me a better person, and makes me realize things that I sometimes can't see in myself. Right? When people are that close to you, it can sometimes serve as a mirror. Right? People are mirrors.
Yeah.
But yeah, mostly through inquiry. And also, being in a confined space for 14 days with another person, it's like, even if you don't try to observe the other person, you can't help but pick up on things,
Right. If
like,
you try to
because
deliberately avoid it, it's amplified. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. But yeah, man, how's Berlin?
I like it here.
Mm.
I like it here. It's a very dense city. Weirdly, it reminds me a lot of Detroit. The makeup of the
Industrial.
buildings, industrial, very car-driven culture, a lot of tough guys who think they're tough. But
Yeah.
it's an interesting place of culture, of dance and expression, and the people really going the extra mile to display their own sense of individuality.
Mm.
And it's also the industrial combined with the artistic expression of the graffiti. Everything's
Mm.
graffitied. And I walk down the streets and I can't help but think to myself, this is what Detroit would have looked like had we not fucked up in all the ways that we did. Right? Like
Mm.
you establish this level of density, this level of safety, this level of culture and families embedded into the cities, not into the suburbs. This is what Detroit could have looked like.
Mm.
Um, and I think I feel like it's a wonderful place to be. It's a bit too cold for me though, so I'm heading back to Lisbon on Saturday. Like
Yeah,
it
yeah.
got chilly. I don't even own a jacket right now, so I'm gonna go back to Lisbon, and I feel like this is gonna be a place for me to visit and work for the foreseeable future. But yeah, it's been interesting because like this Airbnb I rented, man, it's covered with plants and Buddha statues. Every room has got several Buddha statues in it. And my meditations have gotten to a level that I haven't felt like I've ever reached before outside of a float tank.
Mm.
And another interesting thing I've observed is I woke up one night and I was really freaked out. I was like, I woke up in a state of shock because it felt like there was these living beings in the room with me. People might describe it as like, think there's ghosts in the room. It wasn't ghosts, it was plants. The plants were swaying with the wind, and I could distinctly like feel these several living entities like around me. I could like find their positioning, and then I turned on the lights and I realized, oh, these are just plants. It's a very interesting experience, and then it hit me like I've never in my entire life shared a space with living plants. My whole life,
Wow.
like the closest we ever came to is that little villa in Bali. Where like
Wow.
we were
Yeah.
integrated with nature, but still even then, like the living environment was separate from the nature environment. And I realized one thing I've learned through my meditations and being in the space, like I'm so blessed to go home to during this week, is how powerful it is sharing space with live plants.
Mm.
The living energy around you and how much energy it gives you. And I wake up with them, you know what I mean? They're like members of the household, and I become more cognizant of where they are in the physical environment. And it's an energy I've
Mm.
never been around before. I know you have a deep appreciation for plants, so like you might be
Yeah.
interested in hearing about it as well.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. But man, so I read The Superior Man, The Way of the
Mm.
Superior Man. But B, I think on this topic,
Yeah.
one book that I would recommend is Thus Spoke the Plant.
Mm.
I would highly recommend that book, Thus Spoke the Plant. It is all about plant intelligence and plant sentience, and the beautiful life of
Mm.
plants. And
Yeah.
the author Monica Gigliano, she is the first person that I've ever seen strike this balance of being an academic scientist and one foot in that world, and then also having another foot in the world of human plant connection through ceremony and elders and tradition. So like really diving into plant consciousness, sentience, intelligence. And it's the most beautifully written book. And the way she describes it is that the plants wrote the book through her. She got a calling from the plants to write this book. And she wrote this book about the plants, Thus Spoke the Plant. And at the end is a beautiful monologue from the perspective of the tobacco plant, right? The father plant. And it brought me to tears, yo. It brought me to tears. That final monologue is a beautiful book. But yeah, sharing space with plants, I think that needs to be a priority, to actually incorporate interactions and space sharing with other species into our lives, right? And it's so easy to not do that in cities.
Right.
It's so easy to, disregard non-human species in cities, right? But if you think about the genome of a plant versus the genome of a human, it's actually far more complex. There are it's a lot larger than that of humans, right? So it's like there's so much there with plants.
Yeah.
Right? When you think about the different kingdoms of nature, right? So if you believe in this classification of kingdoms, right, which there is, validity there, right? You have the animal kingdom, you have the plant kingdom, you have three other kingdoms, right? This plant kingdom, plant life is you have the fungal kingdom, right? But plant life is such a different expression of life and a vastly complex one and such a beautiful, powerful energy. Dude, think about, plant life was here far before we were.
Yeah.
Plant, and think about the constant communication we are in with plants. Think about the fact that the plant is breathing in carbon dioxide and breathing out oxygen. You are breathing in oxygen and breathing out carbon dioxide. You are in communication with those plants in your home.
Yeah. So without me, they don't eat.
They would eat. They would just suck it up from the atmosphere. There's a lot of carbon that that exists around us. Carbon's a necessary thing, right? I think carbon gets a bad rap because we have an excess of carbon. We have an excess of carbon caught in these greenhouse gases that are just kind of piling up in the ozone layer, right? But carbon's a necessary thing and it exists all around us. So plants, like every plant is sequestering carbon. Like you see a plant outside, they are sequestering carbon from. That's why reforestation is such a big thing, right? People want to reforest deforested areas because, like, we're realizing the vast impacts when we lose biodiversity and lose natural ecosystems, but also B, there is this beautiful carbon sequestering ability that plants not only do, but have to do, but yeah, so without us, they would probably be better off, perhaps, to be honest. They would still get carbon, but they would be, I think they would be better off. At the moment, I don't think we've really found our ecological role yet as humans.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's the first time I've ever felt connection to a plant, with the exception of plant-based ceremonies.
Yes, dude.
And maybe it's because I did hallucinogenic mushrooms on Saturday, right? Like a week ago, not even a week ago, I was booming on these mushrooms. And I think with that comes a very fresh perception of your immediate surroundings, right? Like your mind, I feel like everything's kind of open in a way to new forms of information coming in. And it was crazy waking up in the middle of the night, being fully convinced there's other beings in my room, multiple. And I remember thinking, like, there's one here, 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 and here. Waking up, turning on the lights, and being like, oh, they're plants. I just didn't notice them before. I didn't notice them before I went to sleep. And
Wow.
I could distinctly feel their energy around me.
Mm.
And it's become a comfort to me waking up these four plants in my room. Beautiful. There's a ficus plant. I downloaded an app to figure out what plant they are. Google Lens does a good job of doing it. And I just feel like, I don't know, it's very comforting having these plants in my space. And I don't know, I've never looked at a plant that way in my entire life.
Wow. What's the
Yeah.
app, by the way?
Google Lens.
Okay.
Yeah, it can recognize anything in the wild, including all plant-based life. It's all trained on machine learning, and
What?
hundreds of thousands of pictures of ficuses. It knows what a ficus is, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. For
Um,
sure.
it's one thing that machine learning is very good at doing is detecting images based in historical data, and like we had got enough pictures of plants categorized in such ways where
For
it's
sure.
quite good at detecting them. But yeah, I don't feel like I've ever had that appreciation. It's like a newfound, first thing to do when I get home, I'm going to ficus plant. I'm going to put it on top of my dresser and share my space with it. I don't know. It brings a sense of comfort and well-being, and also like responsibility, like to care for these things. Bonsai and
Mm-hmm.
like, these things have individual personalities and individual conscious experiences that you just don't put thought into unless you put thought into it,
Yeah.
right? Um, it's been a very interesting innovation, and
Mm.
yeah.
Yeah. They are no good. Sorry. Continue.
How do you develop closer relationships with plants?
Mm. I think what you're doing is like getting a plant and actually developing, making a concerted effort to. I think for me, a lot of my, the two things that have brought me closer to plants and feeling closer of a connection to plants is plant medicine
Mm,
and also my interest in gardening and permaculture and like actually understanding and growing, really growing. So like working with the hands,
mm,
right? And really like working to either maintain and nurture or plant and grow plant life. And
mm,
I think if you have a garden or have plants in your home and to really care for them and show love and exchange love and to see that process, they I think that helps develop the connection. But once the connection's there, it never goes away. Like
mhm.
once you see it, you can't unsee it. Now
Right.
that you have this experience, it's there, right?
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think growing plants has been such a huge thing in terms of developing that deep connection to them. I talk to plants, I sing to plants, you know,
Yeah.
I interact with the plants and they're beautiful. If you really look at a plant as a living being for what it is, they're absolutely beautiful. Some of the color patterns, some of the elegant, graceful ways of growing and flowing and dancing and being, right? It's beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. It's something that I've never really appreciated until now. And
Mm,
there's something that I heard in a lecture the other day. That really was really interesting to me. It was this lecturer Ram Dass, like an OG psychedelic like guy who
right.
went through this whole awakening. You haven't heard of him? I mean, I've heard of him, but I never really dove into his lectures.
I've heard of them. Yeah.
He explains the concept of Brahma. So you
Yeah.
have, and it's like everything that comes from the divine is Brahma, and
Hmm.
everything is an expression of it. So we're not separated from the trance. It's like every thought
No.
is a different expression of Brahma that is incarcerated in this form. And I've never thought of the world as an individualistic expression of one. You know, like
Mm,
I use different metaphors mentally for it, but like to actually look at the makeup of my thoughts in my body, in that plant, and every other plant and body and thing as Brahma, and see everything as Brahma, is something I've never. I feel like I've said it in different ways, but never looked at it that
interesting. Yeah. Whereas I've kind of begun seeing it as such, I think maybe a few years ago, but substitute that word Brahma for. I'm very familiar with Brahma. From yeah, the Bhagavad Gita. I read the Bhagavad Gita last year, dude. The holy book of Hinduism.
way.
Um, fire. But yeah, substitute that word Brahma for life, right? Or substitute that word Brahma for nature, right? Substitute that word Brahma for God, right? Whatever you may find to be that Brahma, right? That supreme life science, that supreme life energy. We are all just different expressions of it.
Mm,
You know, we're different expressions of the same thing. You know,
yeah,
we're different. We're just different expressions of the same life.
yeah.
You know, um, and we have, yeah, sure, different traits and different characteristics, but ultimately we are different, just different expressions of Brahma.
Mm. Yeah, it's kind of warped my perception on everything because everything felt so separated and like so much judgment, but it feels like it's really come together when you I think it was even the like in my head when I was listening to these lectures, it was like the visualization of it coming from that place and manifesting into this form. You know, I've
Mm,
tried to draw this before. I've attempted to, but it always felt like, okay, the earth was here and then the other shit came, right? Or like something was here and then that, where versus like this is just a single expression of it. And starting from a place of nothing and going to a place of something has been something that's really been sticking with me. Another thing that's been sticking with me from these lectures is, and I've only been through like 7 of them, so like maybe 3.5 hours of programming. And another thing that's really is how these masters operate, meaning what happens when these gurus reach these perfect states of consciousness, how they can exist in the physical three-dimensional form across all states of consciousness, and what they do with their physical manifested bodies and the minds that come with them.
mm,
At some point in a lot of these gurus experiences, they're given a mantra, and what they do is they begin to meet the mantra, and you'll find a mantra that really resonates with you. And even when these gurus are interacting with the people around them, like Ram Dass through all of his lectures, he's saying like, hey, I'm here, but I'm not here. I'm talking to you, but I'm not talking to you. And he goes into, he's like, I'm actually repeating this mantra in my head. Am pranayame am pranayame. And it's become so deeply embedded into my psyche that I'm always in the state of mantra giving in a place that's very far away from here, as are all the other gurus. So what happens is they, through these mantras, they become so integrated with the divine that their catalysts in their bodies become a channel for love and light. And they begin channeling from a place of somewhere that isn't them, and they join all these homies and all these gurus in this place of complete detachment. It's fucking fascinating. It even says like, sometimes I'll turn my head and I'll be curious as what they say, right? It's from a point of curiosity. I'm sitting with you. I'm not listening from my perspective. I'm not giving you a lecture from my perspective.
wow.
And it's been interesting because like I've even started chanting a bit, like in the back of my head, and I found myself today at lunch with this whole team here in Berlin. I had this chant going in my head as I was having conversations. I feel like this is like a consequence of being a software engineer my whole life. Like being able to hold two things in parallel. I can hold like a
Yeah.
debugging session in my head while conversation, right?
You got the background jobs running.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And even knowing, like, and I've chanted before, but I knew what the words meant. So,
Mm,
like, the word of, like, the start of the light, right? In
yeah.
Pranayama, the lotus into the cadaver of the heart, right? The light being sitting on the lotus and the cadaver of the heart. Like, that was, I was chanting it as I was having full conversations with people from a point of
Wow.
observation. And it was fucking wonderful, man. I felt like my heart was open, my love was open, and so much non-judgment. And like anytime I felt any sort of judgment, I would return to the mantra, and I felt nothing but love and light. And man, like the magnetism of the people around me, and the magnetism of the energy I was bringing of non-judgment, of love and light, was fascinating, dude. Even
Wow.
I released a headless implementation of our website today. Shop.yoursuper.com. Check it out. Fucking 85 score in Lighthouse, yo. And I was working and I was fucking chanting. And I was like in this state of like channeling while I was just going through my everyday life. And it
Wow.
was it was fucking fascinating. It was like you could have this state of like love and expression and joy while just going through your everyday life and your interactions with people, and even through like your work and like doing software engineering. And it occurred to me that we don't have to be the yogis in the mountains and the caves in order to integrate this love and light in a constant, consistent, and deliberate basis.
Yeah.
It's an option, don't get me wrong, and there probably is a lot of depth to that option. I've never tried it before, but I do believe there's ways to integrate these mantras and these practices into everyday life.
Yes, I agree. I totally agree. And
Yeah.
I think there's so much there. Yeah. Because really it's about, baking it into your subconscious, and
Mm,
baking it into your being and your essence. And one thing that we do is every night we go to sleep with mantras. We
mm.
actually play
You
mantras
and
to go to
Cam.
sleep. Hmm.
Wow.
And so the Dalai Lama put out an album on his birthday this year.
What?
It's
Dalai
called
Lama,
it's
he dropped a mixtape?
he dropped a mixtape. Yeah, he dropped a mixtape a few
Wow.
months ago on his birthday, right?
Uh-huh.
And it's called Inner World, and
Mm.
it's an album of mantras. And he's got some really groovy tunes in there as well. But also when I'm working, I play mantras as well. You know, um,
Mm.
but yeah, I think listening to them and like letting them flow through you and becoming the mantras and chanting them, it's powerful. There's
Yeah.
so much to mantric science, you
Mm.
know,
Well,
that
it's
that I'm only really now scratching the surface of.
it's funny because I knew I needed mantras. A couple weeks
Mm,
ago, it occurred to me, I started making them up. I started just like repeating things, like putting things. I was like, because I like listening to songs on repeat, and it started saying words on repeat, and like it just kind of occurred to me during one of my meditations. I'm like, yo, I could just take any words, turn it into a mantra, right?
yeah,
And
yeah.
it can be positive words or negative words, and the more you say it, the more it loses meaning.
Mm,
These mantras, however, are very interesting because they have deliberate meaning behind them,
mm,
where you have these mantras of that have very deep resonant meaning, and like that, even some gurus have their own specific mantras. So when you're praying to a specific encapsulation of consciousness, you can actually call on that mantra, and the
mm,
results are phenomenal. And maybe it's a bit of my psychotic mind, right? I'm a very visual thinker that leads to these things happening. But when I learn a new mantra, I'll tap into it. I'll just like, even I found this Wikipedia full of them. So I ran an experiment where I did the mantra while I was walking today. I woke up really early and walked all of Berlin. I just want to see the city, not just
nice.
freaking Bernheim, like where I was staying. I skipped yoga to
Yeah.
go do this. And I would just pick a mantra. I'd start repeating it. And then after I did it for like a half hour, I would go look at what the mantra meant. And the correlation between what the mantra like what the images that came through and what it actually meant were very it was crazy. Yeah. It was
Yeah.
crazy how closely encapsulated a lot of these things were, and obviously it's all empirical. I don't have any evidence of this, but is someone who's a visual thinker. It was very interesting, like how powerful these are, and it became this sort of game to see how many things can I successfully do while repeating these mantras.
Mm,
It was phenomenal, man. Like,
right.
and when you're always filling your head with something, your words become so much more deliberate.
Yeah.
Right? You feel like you are calling in the divine and the encapsulation of this higher spirit. Like the words you choose to use and the actions you take become so much more deliberate because you're already at peace.
Mm, mm,
You recognize there's nothing to be said or nothing to be done because you're already in a place of peace, in a place of
yeah.
connection. And I've just had a day of this, and it's been very interesting, the learnings from today.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Wow. Have you ever heard of or seen mantra boxes?
No.
So the first time I saw this, I was in India. I was in a very tiny village in India. Um, and I was staying with this family, and they had this box. It looked like, I don't know, it looked like this kind of Cinderella thing that we had in Brooklyn when we were kids, like this thing that would just kind of
Hmm.
twirl around. But it would just play a mantra all day, the same
Mm.
mantra over and over again in the kitchen,
Hmm.
right? And so I also have heard of people that have mantra boxes in every room of the house. So
Hmm.
every room you're in the house, there's always a mantra playing. Right. So take that concept of the mantra box, and then also take the concept of what Ramdas was saying about, the power of what can happen when people have embedded or encoded these mantras collectively. I think there could be something interesting there
I agree.
to explore, of like what, with these tools that we have available to us, how can we really, tap into collective mantra encoding? And because, but it's a very hard thing. I think it's a very hard thing to measure the efficacy of. I think it's more something that people would need to feel by taking this on, right? I think
Mm.
there are probably some cool ways to encourage more mantric more mantric practices into people's daily lives.
Yeah.
And I do actually think that the impact of that would be vast,
Yeah. I agree.
you know?
I agree. It's been interesting because I feel like it's because the other thing that's fascinating about these lectures, like these Ramdas lectures, the shit's from the 70s. You had somebody, like one individual, who took the initiative to record these, and the recordings are always like hit or miss. Like, everyone you listen to, some of them are really high quality, other ones are shit, right? And but the lessons and the concepts and the themes still resonate today,
Right,
right? 50 years later, they're still like
right.
so needed and so dead on. So you got to ask yourself, like, what tools through these lessons that are being passed down through these generations, what new advantages do we have today that can be integrated into a practice of actually bringing these things to life? Because like now we have pixels. Never had
Yeah,
pixels when he was doing
yeah,
these things, right? You have phones that are interconnected between all these different people, which have the ability to coordinate them in ways that were previously impossible. Like, in order to even participate in these lectures, there's no Spotify, there's no fucking, the guy, Raghu Marcus, who put together the podcast, he was actually a DJ at a local radio station, started playing these lectures on the radio station.
wow.
It was fascinating was when he went to go meet Maharaji, the guru that taught Ramdas, right? He found people from Canada who happened to listen into the lectures that he was playing on the radio station. Think about that. It's such a small fucking subset of what's possible nowadays. You have happens to find these lectures, happens to be a DJ at this radio station, plays it on the radio station, and people still took action based on the words that are coming out of the radio maybe once a week. So
Right.
there's a lot of modern advantages to be able to spreading these things at scale, right?
Yeah. 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 And I think, it's, some of it kind of reminds me a bit of the concept that you came up with on the plane.
Ah, yeah.
Right. Of like that, I think there's some essence of that, or some ethos of that, when it's looked at in the context of mantras, of collective chanting, right? Or collective mantra encoding, right? Like, what if I was able to know, or what if I knew that all the other people around me also were, using this mantra today, or chanting this mantra today, Waheguru, right? Or I don't know.
Yeah. Well, to give some context to this, for whatever reason, I had an idea for an app where you open it up and you're dropped into a joint meditation with other people. And I've seen incarnations of this, but what made this one unique is it's all around the collective meditation. It's mantra driven, so you listen to the mantras in parallel, and you can actually put your intention into the field. So you can share your intentions with the group, and the original inspiration behind this is a vision I've had many times in a float tank, where you basically, it's kind of like this giant sun-like object where you can actually fly to it, and in the middle of it you can put your intention, and all these different healers come and they can actually heal it with you, and your role is to hold space, right? And if you're not holding space, they kind of push you out, right? And so it's a place to come to not only meditate, but also when you're in the feeling of healing, it's a place where you can go to actually heal things. It's very interesting.
Wow.
It's a place I've returned to many times in meditation. That's the two, like in the app that I drew up and you've seen the mocks of, is a two-dimensional representation of this healing bubble of positive intention setting surrounded by healers who come together through these, what I think is a good way to coordinate them would be through a joint mantra. Granted, the one I went to never had a mantra. We didn't need it. Just a lot of people shooting light into it. But then again, I don't hear anything in that space. So maybe there was one. But I think it was an interesting first step into when augmented reality hits and we can actually hold space in a fucking bubble of light, right? Like all these different representations of these that these gurus see in their heads and most likely also visit, they're going to be coming full head on when it comes to this movement into augmented reality, where we can visualize things in ways that make sense because they're in the three-dimensional plane, not in two-dimensional.
Right. Yeah.
And I think we can leverage this to accomplish some pretty incredible things.
And namely, you think bringing some of these visions to life in a physical manifestation, in a three-dimensional manifestation.
Correct.
Wow. Yeah, for sure.
Because what's happening right now is you have a lot of gurus, a lot of these guys in caves, and you assume that these are the loneliest people in the world who are sitting in these caves in the middle of fucking nowhere. Couldn't be further from the truth. These people are embodied into what I believe are these communities of healers and of mantric gurus who have effectively ascended and can tap into these records of knowledge that we can't even conceptualize.
Yeah.
These visualizations and these three-dimensional representations of this, you're not reading about on Wikipedia no more. You're actually experiencing it firsthand. Not through a third-person degree perspective, like through a video game, right? Which we're used to. Most good video games, GTA, Fortnite, whatever, you see it from third-degree perspective. This is a first-person perspective. That's the big difference maker, is that you're no longer playing the camera who's observing the character in the video game. You are the first-person character in it. And that changes a lot of things. Changes your perception of what is possible and what is real. So kids growing up, like today, they think an iPad is their portal into a place of infinite knowledge. It's true. Kids growing up in art in the next generation are going to think to themselves that the world around them is a portal into the infinite, because it is.
Mm, mm, mm. Wow. One really interesting thing that just popped into mind. I think someone's messaging on Slack over and over. That's the most annoying sound in my headphones.
Turn that
But
shit
one
off.
thing
Yeah,
I
you gotta
know,
turn that
yeah,
off. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, dude. How
Close it.
annoying is the
Close
Slack
it.
notification sound? It's
Yeah,
like,
everyone knows it. I turn mine off. I
yeah,
turn off all notification sounds. I don't fuck with it
dude. I have no notifications on my phone
at all.
at all.
That's
The
great.
only one I forgot to turn off is WeChat, but not many people hit me up on WeChat.
No, it's
But
also about to be illegal.
because the
So
thing is, it's notifications are. Think about. Okay, this is a diversion. So let me talk. We'll
yeah, it's
talk
fine.
about that in a bit. Let me talk more about what this brought up for me. What you're saying brought up for me, and then we'll put a flagpole in the notifications.
Yeah.
But thinking about augmented reality, one really interesting thing, one use case that really gets me excited is kind of this scavenger hunt type of capability to leave things somewhere and for someone else to find them. When you
Mm,
combine AR with geolocation, right? The
yeah.
ability to really plant something somewhere and for someone else to find them. And when you were talking about um, AR and bringing these visions to a 3D manifestation, I was just thinking about meditation spaces and different meditation spaces um, in nature and in natural spaces, and whether it would be cool somehow if people can see the spaces that other people have meditated in and kind of create
Right.
these designated, because I feel like our frequency can change the frequency of the space around us, right? So I think having some visual manifestation of these healing spaces where other people have been, and maybe they could leave prayers, maybe they can leave mantras, maybe they can leave blessings, right? But
Yeah.
it was just very early, just a synapse that kind of connect when you were talking. That was the thing that popped into my head.
You ever played the game
Maybe
Animal
nothing,
Crossing?
but no. Is it
So
like
in Animal
Frogger?
Crossing, yeah, fuck yeah, I played Frogger.
No, is it like Frogger?
No, it's not like Frogger.
Okay.
It's a Nintendo game, and you play as this little animal, and there's no point to the game. It's like all about like just building your city and your town, designing your house. It's a great game for like people who enjoy designing fucking houses, right? But what's interesting is Nintendo in the most recent version introduced a feature where you can fly to each other's islands. And the islands basically look the same, but people like the creativity within this sandbox environment is fucking insane. So
Wow.
you'll go to like someone's, it's just like I can't even begin to explain. You gotta go on the Reddit and see all the different Animal Crossing things. It's amazing, and it wouldn't be far fetched for you to be able to take a designated space and effectively see other people's Animal Crossing islands, but manifest it into the physical space, right?
Ooh, wow.
Yeah, it's like you can take the same concept of Animal Crossing and apply it to the world around you. I mean, frankly, you don't even need to wait for AR. You could do that nowadays. I mean, I've
Sure.
seen blue sky where you point your phone at the sky, you can see like it's so simple. It's like AR but for the sky. So you can draw on the sky and then like anyone
Yo, yes.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
like that, but it's a bit more complex than that. You could integrate geolocation, but yeah, you could definitely leave things behind. I feel like it's already happening. But
I think so.
it's a matter of scale of okay, everyone knows to open up this app with this specific integration tied to this database where this shit's stored and find it interesting enough to do so.
For sure. You got to have the density. You need
Yeah.
to have the density of users to really make it useful, But
This is
I
why I'm
think,
very bullish on Snapchat. I think Snapchat's a good investment because they're very forward thinking in the AR space, and they have more
yeah,
trust than Facebook at this point in time.
yeah, yeah. I think Snapchat is leaning into interesting territory, and
Yeah,
they're very clear in their mission.
Right.
You know, they're very clear on how they view the camera, and the
Mm.
camera as being a fundamental piece of human progress,
Right.
right? Like they're
Their
very,
camera company.
yeah,
Yeah, you read that investors report where they said, we're not a technology company, we're a camera company. And I
yeah,
thought that was so interesting. It's like seeing everything through the lens. I thought that was a brilliant play on what Snapchat's really great at.
for sure.
But then again, it's like I'm here fucking picking stocks and everything's winning. So who the fuck knows?
Yeah,
like, like,
yeah,
no losers
yeah.
anymore.
I know, it's crazy. It's
Stupid.
it's crazy.
I don't know what to say
but
anymore.
but dude, so my take on notifications is
Yeah.
that I think it's hard for notifications, and yeah, because okay, we have finite attention,
Mm.
right? One could say that our most finite and valuable resource is our attention, right? Some might say it's time, some might, but I would say it's our attention, right? It's our attention.
It's everything.
And our attention is everything,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so with a notification, if you think about a push notification, that means the entire world is entitled to my attention at any moment in time.
Mm-hmm.
Once I see a notification, you can't unsee it, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's an involuntary attention diversion.
Right.
And sure, it could not be, it may not be the biggest deal, but that over and over again programmatically, right, of just like having your attention diverted at the drop of a dime, I thought was something I just wanted to experiment with not having at all.
How's it been?
Oh, dude, I've been doing this for a minute. Um, and occasionally I do have to, like, I do reactivate notifications on certain things, because the biggest use case of notifications for me is when you're actually trying to do something transactional, like meeting up with somebody in a city,
Mm. Yeah.
and they're like texting you, like, where you at? I'm here, or let's meet up in an hour. And it's like,
Yeah.
well, I'm not checking I'm not getting the notifications. I think that's the biggest use case. Aside from that use case, I'm pretty chilling with it, and I just make sure that, my calls are scheduled out and set up, and that I'm showing up for the things I need to show up for, and shit's on the calendar. And,
Yeah.
but everything else comes as, when I check my phone, I'll like look at messages and stuff like that, rather than
Yeah.
the other way around, you know?
Right. It's interesting because I feel like I used to do the same thing. My phone was in black and white, notifications off. Dude, I deactivated my email for like 2 years. I didn't have
Dude,
an
I
email
took no
address.
me too.
Yeah. I mean, I literally had an autoresponder on saying, hey, if it's important, WhatsApp me. And like 3 things actually I got calls for. Like, yo, I need to like reach you. I'm like, all right, yeah, cool. Great, it's working. Right? I never missed anything though. I never once
Right.
felt like through that whole time I missed out on anything. And it's something that we've become so passively accustomed to. Um, and I notice it now because like I've got my computer for coding, but I've also got my iPad here for like other shit. And the iPad lights up with notifications now because my phone's not out. And like I find myself like, it's much more deliberate. It's like my attention goes to it and it's never productive. I
Mm,
and it's you're right, because like what happens is it's not only these people are entitled to it, but it's also the smartest people in the world are figuring out ways to hit your serotonin to get you more embedded through notifications into their individual experiences, right? The smartest engineers on the planet are at Google, are at Facebook, are at these attention grabbing places where their primary metric is your attention, right?
yeah.
So you got to be cognizant of that and be very mindful of how much you're giving away and what the real cost is, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Paying $2 for an app every month, like Instagram's, I don't even know like what their cost per user is, or their revenue per user. It's pretty great from what I hear, but what is the real cost to it when you're putting 40 minutes a day into Instagram and Facebook, which most people do, right?
Mm,
Which we do that at scale. You're talking 200 hours a year over the course of someone's lifetime. You're talking about 10,000 hours.
yeah. You're reaching mastery and scrolling through social media.
And doing what one man wants you to do,
Yeah.
right? It's one man who
Yeah.
owns that: Instagram, Facebook, and WhatsApp. People
Yeah.
forget that. One man.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I hear what you're saying, and it's become so normalized that I am concerned, and I've been concerned. But it got to the point where I just feel, because I spent some time fighting this, man. I tried building things to stop it, and it feels very powerless. Really trying to fight the machine. I think what we need is more self-realization, not
Yeah.
technology fight the technology. We need human
Yes.
technology and enlighten, like really it's necessary now is like enlightenment and coming back to self, and the things that you're even realizing. We need more people to realize that,
We need to upgrade our OS.
right? To fight
You know?
the operating systems we've created,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is
Because
crazy.
our human hardware has been moving rapidly, right? But our human OS, I think, has not had a upgrade along with that, right? We have this old OS that's kind of subject to this newer hardware. And I'm
Hmm.
using hardware and software in the context of humanity, right? I look at hardware as the objective realities around us, the phone's connectivity, all that. I look at our software as our internal programming. Um, but
Hmm.
yeah, dude, I'm with you on the notifications. I think that, not fighting technology with technology, and instead, there are ways to change your relationship to it. You can have notifications on and not let it affect you, right? Like, I deleted email from my phone for a good amount of time, but now I have email back on my phone. I just don't pay it any mind. I don't care if I have a bunch of emails
Hmm.
waiting there.
Right.
It's like, take your power back,
Amen.
take your power back.
Yeah, I feel like that applies to all situations, and you gotta be cognizant of when your power is lost.
Mm,
It's your attention, man. Because what happens is, even like in the minds of people who think about other people and the way those other people think about them, they don't realize they're giving their power when they're boxing shadows, right?
yeah.
The truth is, like, in
Yeah.
those like more normalized circumstances, this should have existed before phones, where you thought about what other people thought of you, right? That you're boxing shadows. Now you're boxing corporations. Now you're boxing like thousands of engineers and psychologists and data scientists and all these different entities and layers of them that are building armies to capture your attention, right?
Mm,
Who can now control not only the technological but political and financial landscape of the world, right?
mm,
And that's the truth of it. These things
yeah,
aren't going the other way. That's why I
for
thank
sure.
God for Apple right now, because they're about to drop a fucking hammer on Facebook's ability to track you cross app. It's going to decimate revenue. It's going to send your marketing costs through the roof. We've already seen the result of it these last couple days. Every company globally
What is
is.
that? What is Apple doing?
Apple is releasing iOS 14 that prevents any cross app tracking and
Wow.
cross browser tracking, cross tab tracking in Safari.
Wow.
And it's not explicitly aimed at Facebook, just that Facebook is the biggest benefactor of these previously undetected fingerprinting mechanisms.
Right.
It's going to be what's going to happen is, now here's the interesting thing. The consequence of these actions is going to be Facebook is not arbitrarily, but based on their current economic model, is going to increase extensively the cost of user acquisition, because it's going to be harder to track. It's going to be harder to do a lot of things that make it calculable. It's the impact of the advertising that's running through Facebook onto these platforms. So all the marketers are going to end up getting fucked, and then every company is going to get fucked, and every VC dollar globally will be fucked because they're going to have to spend another 10 cents on every dollar to acquire a new customer or user.
Right.
All because of Apple.
Wow.
10% of all VC spend over the next 3 years is going to be pushed towards marketing because it's going to be more expensive to acquire a user or customer because of one company's decision. It's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, it is.
How much power we've given away to Apple, to Facebook, and to these other companies. All concentrated.
Very concentrated.
Are real, and everything's been consolidated. And if you're not the winner, then winner controls 70% of the market. The second place controls 20%, and then everyone else maybe 10 to 5%.
Right. But can't you argue that we've given them this power?
Totally, wholly and completely.
Right. Yeah.
Completely.
We made choices, right?
Now the question is, can we take it back?
Yeah.
I don't believe so.
I don't think so. Because we would have to be willing to give up a lot to take it back. And are you willing to make those sacrifices right now? Right? Are you right?
The U.S. government ran a survey that said, how much money would you have to be paid to give up Google for a year? It was pretty, and this is a couple of years ago. I don't know if this is still the case. It could have changed based on the survey because they were trying to quantify the tax that should be taxed in Google, right? How do you quantify the value of Google per customer? So I believe that the survey found that people would have to be paid on average of $7,000 to $8,000 to give up Google, all Google services, Google Maps, Google Search, Google everything, Gmail for the year.
Wow.
So the reason I did this is like now they have a monetary value of what Google's worth per user, right?
Right.
You could potentially tax that. It's pretty high. It's pretty high cost. So it's wonderful that Google, Facebook, and all these things are free, but what is the real cost to your attention? Something you got to really, really lean into and ask yourself, what is the value of your attention? That will drive your motivation and your willingness to give it away for very cheaply. Boom. Good place to end.
I think that was, I think that was powerful, bro. I think that was like, I've got,
Been real, guys. Thank you for listening. Have a good life.